Welcome to the first lecture for art appreciation. Um, I want to recommend everybody to take notes for these lectures. I try to speak enthusiastically, but these recordings of lectures are somewhat new for me. So if you take notes, you're more likely to stay engaged and not get lulled to sleep by my voice. I hope I'm not too boring. Um, all right, let's get started. We begin our class with an online reading from John Berger. In the first chapter of Ways of Seeing, Berger begins by discussing how seeing comes before words, um, and how words don't always describe what we are truly seeing. Or to be more precise with my own words, that the words are inaccurately describing what is physically happening. He uses examples such as the sunset or the sunrise, how we know that these events occur from the Earth's axis rotation, yet the term gives away to conveying that it is through the sun's movement. Um, so Berger also uses Rene Magritte's painting titled Key of Dreams, this painting here, for the cover of the image for his book, Ways of Seeing. And this eventually, you're seeing videos of this posted as well in these modules because this turned into a television program for a short time. So Rene Magritte was a Belgian surrealist. Surrealism was an art movement that spawned from the throes of modernism and with the intentions to resolve the previously contradictory conditions of dream and reality into an absolute reality, a super reality. Um, what we should know is this is a series of artworks that Rene Magritte made. It wasn't just one painting. And it went through the course of a number of years that he would do this work. But all kind of share a common motive and way of positioning the viewer to look. So and this is all dealt with the composition in a painting. Or any image. The composition is how an artist organizes or composes forms in an artwork. And this, obviously, we could find this in so many different fields, composition, changing things. If we look at the composition in this image, each of the frame in the grid is black with a word written with a white similar to chalk. And they're all organized in this kind of grid of this kind of painted grid that is made to look somewhat volumetric and illusionistic in that sense that it's raised above the surface, but it is also part of the painting. It's part of a flat image. So this is something that we want to think about how he's framing these things for us to look at it. We are trying to read these words as some type of conjunction with the image floating above it. And pretty much in almost every case, and I say almost because there is one exception, the image doesn't line up with the text, and there is that gap between that the viewer has to kind of grapple with and think about. And maybe this is just a way of kind of talking about, in our dreams the horse is a door, but it was a way of presenting imagery to make us think about things. Now this is one of his famous images, and it goes with much chagrin and humor, the treason of images, where in French this reads, "This is not a pipe." Um, Magritte was practicing a method of oil painting for a number of years, and that is this trompe l'oeil, this idea of to deceive the eye, to completely make it feel like something is an image is something you could reach in and grab or belong, kind of step into. So, by painting this image as realistically as possibly of a pipe and saying it's not a pipe, Magritte was really kind of challenging these concepts of what the power of an image, what it is. Berger in his book writes, an image is a sight which has been recreated or reproduced. It is an appearance or set of appearances which has been detached from the place and time in which it has first made its appearance and preserved for a few moments or for a few centuries. I think Magritte fully understood what the power of the image and what it did, what it sold, and how it changed the way that we looked at objects, looked at people, looked at places, looked at history. Uh, it it was a very powerful tool in this time period. So the one thing I also want to kind of look at is the breadth of Rene Magritte, and that is he was a surrealist, but he didn't paint all of his images with this kind of didactic educational explanation. He would actually paint a number of works where he talks about space in a much more complex way. We still can analyze this through composition. If we were to look at the two paintings, one to the left, which is The Key of Dreams, and the one to the right, which is called Not to be Reproduced, and we're going to go into this a little bit further. But we can kind of recognize in The Key of Dreams, all of the images are positioned, situated on the canvas in a very even manner. This kind of creates a symmetry, even though the horse and the clock are not, you know, having symmetrical shapes. Their placement and the black space around them kind of situates them in a symmetrical composition, this grid. Whereas the other painting, the figurative painting of Not to be Reproduced, the figure just occupies the bottom left corner, and that dark suit is echoed again in the mirror, along with the shock of hair that's there. Then there's this kind of empty, vacuous space behind or in front, so to speak, of the figure that we can't really depict what that space is, and it leaves a kind of empty, blank space for the upper right section of the painting. And this kind of creates a asymmetrical and off-balanced composition within the overall image. Now, what we're doing is basically called formal analysis of art historical practices, and this is what we're going to do throughout the semester, which is really analyze every aspect and really try to talk about every difference when we're talking about between two artists or within one artist's work, and how it may vary. But how it might still be talking about some of the same things, and that's what I'm going to try to address in these two images. Rene Magritte's Not to be Reproduced was an oil on canvas. It's a little bit larger, or actually no, it's probably around the same size as the Key of Dreams. The painting itself has that kind of philosophical tension of what a mirror image is, and what the reproduction of an image is, and what it tells us maybe. And maybe what also we're really allowed to see, we kind of assume that maybe this is a man from the time period that it came from, but that would be still a pretty bold assumption, so to speak, especially coming from Rene Magritte, who might be thinking about those questions. Definitely, this was done in a time well within the photochemical reproductions. And so to create this image talking about reproductions and denying the viewers kind of the face of this person is this kind of maybe refute to some of the concepts that come along with image reproduction that I think maybe Rene Magritte was grappling with or not. But it just raises the question. The one thing about this painting is the use. Well, with surrealism, you can't say realism. You can't say surrealism without saying realism. Surrealism's aim was to resolve the previously contradictory conditions of dream and reality into an absolute reality, a super reality. This was kind of the announcement, the manifesto of surrealism by Andre Breton. And Magritte definitely followed in league with this, although getting to kind of explore things on his own ventures with his own attitude. Um, Realism definitely played into this concept. So we want to talk about reality and the things that would frame looking at an image and trying to relate it to reality. With the flat two-dimensional space of Key of Dreams, we come to this painting with this understanding that we're being expected to kind of pair the two together and try to make some sense in our mind. Maybe read the poetry of what he's discussing. But all the while, the images and the objects, the frame itself is also painted with this illusion of volume. That's not to say there is a depth of space. I mean, all of them situated on this flat black space still kind of puts them on the same plane. So there's this kind of tension that he kind of creates with that black space. With the illusory space that we're going to kind of break down with not to be reproduced, there's this kind of idea of illusion and three-dimensional space that occurs. And this is through the conventions of perspective, so to speak. He kind of uses that in a couple of different ways by the figure, kind of bringing attention to the echo of the figure. And I again will emphasize the word echo because I'm trying to emphasize it's not a mirror image, but it looks like it's just a little further away. It's an echo of that. Whereas the book itself, situated on the mantle, is a mirror image. You can see that the angles that it's positioned in kind of converge into each other. So perspective is what Berger brings up as a convention, and it's something that you really want to think about. It's a system, a pictorial device for organizing forms in space. And it's really, like I said, it's a convention or a system for us to try to explain how human optics work and how to explain that on a flat plane like a sheet of paper or a canvas. One of the earliest depictions of this is going to be witnessed in Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. And this isn't the earliest. We can find that one of those would be this kind of fresco of which is a mixture of pigment and plaster. This was discovered, I think, in the late 1800s when they uncovered some of the rooms in Bosco Real, which is probably really close to Herculaneum. And these paintings were preserved under sheets of volcanic ash that was dried up. But in this image, we can see kind of a perfect single point perspective, and that is we can kind of take a look and see how the architecture and the columns and the way they are aligned show this convergence of space, this depth, like we would be able to walk into this little palace of this temple, and which is really impressive for the time period of when this occurs. What we'll understand that is I think maybe architecture itself was something that helped us understand our own optics and how space worked with us and how distance worked within our vision. And really, again, how to convey that, flatten it out into the scale of shapes, moving away in a certain distance and relationship to one another to convey that idea of depth. So looking at his painting, he does it in a really kind of not dealing with architecture, but really the repetition of forms. So it's again the two figures being identical, but only a little smaller. His head is a bit smaller than this head, and the shoulders are a little bit shorter and more narrow and come in. The book, it repeats as well, but again, like I was talking about, it's opposite. The angles